get to an inclusive culture carefully, with intention, and with the understanding that everyone has a role to play. We all have a responsibility to minimize behavior that is exclusionary and to create a space where everyone feels they belong. However, even with that shared goal, knowing what to do is sometimes complicated. When it comes to reining in exclusionary behavior in language, social penalties form one of the most important tools we have, and knowing when to use them is critical. Imagine the following scenario. Two colleagues are sharing an office. Anchali was born in Thailand and came to the US as a child. Max was born and raised in the US. One day they're talking and Max says, "You're really lucky that you're here," where here means the United States. What did you think about Max's statement? Take a minute to write down your thoughts. Was Max's comment just a harmless observation? Was it offensive and exclusionary? Let's dig in. We can imagine a couple of different scenarios. In one, Max's statement comes after Anchali recounted a story of persecution and hardship that her parents experienced in Thailand. In this context, Max's comment may make sense. We can imagine another scenario where Max's comment was made out of the blue, and it sounds pretty rude. It relies on assumptions about Anchali's life in Thailand and her life here in the US that aren't necessarily true. These assumptions come from our ideas about groups. And leaning on assumptions about the kind of experiences someone has had based on the group we see them as belonging to goes against seeing that person as an individual. But as with Max's comment, determining whether someone's words are exclusionary can be complicated and context-specific. Ignoring the role of context in interactions makes open communication difficult. It signals to people that there's no relevant difference between the two possible scenarios around Max's comment. In such an environment, one might reasonably conclude that it's safer to just say nothing at all. And this very much works against the open communication we need to build a truly inclusive culture. What other kinds of things get in the way of the workplace we want to build? Earlier, we mentioned the important role of social penalties in reining in exclusionary behavior. Sometimes, however, social penalties are used in a way that undermines our broader goal. Confused? Hold on and we'll clarify. Let's think about the crucial role that social norms and social penalties play, where social penalties are the consequences of violating social norms. Social norms help govern how we communicate with one another and how we regulate behavior, especially in public spaces and around people we don't know well. For instance, behaviors like shouting during a meeting, taking someone's lunch from the office refrigerator, or staring at someone for a prolonged period of time are all violations of social norms, and in some instances may be a violation of company policy. These norms are like guardrails. They keep us from driving off the road of acceptability. Social penalties, which are incurred when norms are violated, help communicate to people that a behavior or expression is unacceptable. When we use the term penalty, we do not mean something bad actually happening to a person. Rather, we use the term penalty to mean a negative social cue. This can mean a disapproving look, not laughing at a joke, or politely letting someone know that their comment was not appropriate. Social penalties play an important role in how we communicate with one another. For instance, we owe thanks to social penalties for our shared understanding that racial epithets and slurs are always unacceptable. In short, the goal of open communication helps us decide what is considered a social norm violation and when to use social penalties. A complete lack of consequences for any transgression can make people feel like anything goes. Suddenly, it's the Wild West of social interactions, and that's not good for anyone. On the flip side, an over-application of social penalties, particularly when it comes to controversial issues, will take us further from, not closer to, the truly inclusive environment we seek to create. Let's think through a couple of examples. Consider the following statement. Trans women should not be allowed to compete in women's category sports. Is this a valid opinion or a threat to the trans community? For those who view this statement as a threat to the trans community, a social penalty may seem like an appropriate way to communicate that this is unacceptable. This penalty may take the form of a withering look, or it may involve calling out the speaker as transphobic. However, for those who see this statement as a valid opinion, the social penalty is wholly misplaced. So which is it, a valid opinion or a threat? And who gets to decide? This is where it's important to remember our goals: open communication and a truly inclusive culture. Recognizing that reasonable people can have a wide variety of perspectives on controversial issues is crucial, and imposing social penalties in such a context works against the culture we're trying to build. Continuing with our example of trans women and women's sports categories, it's worth thinking about why some people find it hard to stay open to diverse perspectives when it comes to sensitive topics. It's often hard because there are multiple reasons why someone could take such a position, and one of those reasons is transphobia. But transphobia is not the only reason someone may have that perspective. So how should we handle situations when there are multiple possible explanations? We'll go into more detail on that question in a separate module.